Hey, how's it going?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you just fine. Just one second, I'm trying to get some. Hey, how's it going? Sorry, I needed to mute the other one. I started talking to myself there. It's like at 3 seconds delayed.
No worries. I just fixed. Somehow my AirPods were configured to this computer to only play through my right ear.
Yeah, I usually find I have to like unpair them and then repair them whenever it happens. That starts to happen.
Yeah, I just restarted. All right, so two other people had emergencies. I'm in like a hotel room in LA. I'm like, exhausted.
Yeah.
It's like 5 a.m. here.
Oh no! Well, thank you for doing this. We can. Yeah. Everything's kind of everybody's had a problem this morning. So yeah, you're the one person.
Someone had their house hit by lightning.
They're on vacation and where they're staying got hit by lightning, and so they just don't have internet apparently. And then there's another family emergency, and so I don't know. Yeah, it's crazy. So it'll just be you today.
Yeah. Cool. How did you start the new job?
Yeah, I did. I'm there as of like a couple weeks ago now, and it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's really cool. The learning. I just finished the training with their main like intelligent agent tool last week, and so it was like 4 days, 10 to 5, just to learn everything it can do, and it's pretty crazy. Yeah,
from like a machine learning perspective.
Yeah, it's basically a way to do NLU NLP in a intelligent agent, but mostly through user experience. So like you can actually build models and intents all based on like utterances through this tool. It's pretty interesting actually. And then now I'm actually going to be going on a couple sales kind of meetings this next week. I'm going to be up in Boston with Oracle, kind of showing it off to their team. But it's like a lot of very large enterprise customers that buy this usually.
Very cool.
Have you been?
I don't know if you heard that. Good. We're in the middle of fundraising right now, so it's just like chaos. Hence the trip out here. And I don't know if you heard also that like I think X.AI is like over.
Oh really? Crazy.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I mean there's someone that I know that's over there, so I wonder what he's doing. I think he may have already gotten out to go somewhere else. So
yeah, I think like within a week or two it's only gonna be like 5 to 10 people.
Crazy. Yeah, there's another
spent like 16 million. Something like that.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know it'll like get acquired and it'll look like a success.
That's the Silicon Valley way.
Yeah. No, so things are good. It's just been pretty crazy. How'd the chat while go?
The what?
With Kyle.
Oh, good. No, it was really good. Like I definitely need to follow back up. It's just been like a whirlwind for me for the last couple weeks, but
yeah. The timing's just been weird for us. I think once like he kind of gets up and running, wraps his head around everything, then we could revisit.
Yeah, cool. No, and I think that's great. I'm still super excited about it. It's interesting because internal to the organization, they do a certain amount of research, and they actually have a UX team that does a lot of workshopping and stuff like that. But I think it's gonna be really interesting is how do you actually use these types of intelligent agents as they're doing their job to find out more about what they should be doing, right? And that's something I think is kind of interesting. So we'll see. We have like a big conference coming up in May that they're taking a bunch of ideas for kind of like weird bots to create, or not bots, but like anyways, we call it Amelia. I'm still refusing to personify it. But people like in the organization will say she and things like that. I'm like, it's basically just a bunch of math. You guys know that, right? And so that's
sometimes a lot less math than it looks.
Exactly. Well, and that's the thing that's so interesting is that actually they've been able to get to they do actually in invest in implementing pretty current natural language understanding stuff. So like Elmo was a paper that came out like 6 months ago or something like that. We already have an implementation of it, and so that's pretty impressive. Right?
Got it. No, I'm not saying in your case that is impressive, but saying in names that people are given to AI bots, often there's a human with a real name behind it. It's pretty weird.
Oh yeah. No, it is, and it's. I think, you know, the range of ways that clients will actually implement Amelia as well is kind of all over the map, because some of them actually find it, you know, they actually want to have a personification, others don't, and so it's interesting. There's no best practice yet, I think, for the type of case that you want, and so I think that's the part that still needs to be figured out. But yeah. Let me go grab a drink and everything right now. So let me, but we'll get started in like 5 or so minutes. Let's see.
Cool.
All right, cool.
I feel like I should lower my internet requirements just like a touch. All right, I just switched it to medium. Don't tell Jeremy, but you're chopping in and out. Am I coming through clear?
Yeah, you broke up a very tiny bit earlier, but you're fine right now.
Yeah, I have a feeling when we start waking up around the hotel that internet's going to go.
Well, you know what?
He was like, "No, it has to be max." I was like, "It's
not
going to be good."
One time hey. One time I did one of the presentations. I had to bring it down a bunch because otherwise, like, my video was just dropping out. So, anyways, cool. I'm gonna go grab something and I'll be back in a few minutes.
You want to grab a drink? Yeah. Okay.
Check. And so Jeremy wants me to just say to everybody, leave your video on, keep yourself muted, and then prefix your questions and additional comments with the text MM within the Google comments area, and then do not use apps, and ignore any of the chats in the Hangout or the YouTube live screen while you are on. I'm going to be looking at that while Nis is actually doing a presentation. So, anyways.
Cool. And Chris, if you could text me if I drop off or something, because I've got Do Not Disturb on.
Yeah, totally.
Seems pretty stable right now, though.
Yeah. That's good. Wait just like a few minutes. It's the 2670 number, right?
Yeah.
I already had this for some reason.
Possibly for this reason.
Totally. All right, let's see. It's kind of interesting. It looks like Hacker Noon is moving away from Medium. Just got a note from them about all the content I've published with them.
Totally moving away off of Medium.
Yeah.
Wow. It's like top 10 publication on there.
Yeah.
And they just raised $1 million, Hacker Noon.
Oh, really? It's still interesting to me to see that whole thing is like something bigger than a hobby for some reason. I don't know.
Yeah.
I used to work with newspapers a long time ago when they were going out of business. So I don't know.
Hey, it's a popular publication.
It totally is. It totally is.
I don't know how they're going to move off the Medium, though. I guess because they have the Facebook group and all that.
Yeah, they've been doing a lot with the different various authors and stuff like that too, I think. So it's been seen more activity from them at least.
Yeah.
So,
and they probably feel they give more to Medium than they get at this point.
Yeah, probably.
That's a whole other talk we could give on Medium's product roadmap, just totally shooting themselves in the foot every day.
Let me see. So there's like one site I've always gone to for top Medium publications. Yeah, Free Code, The Mission, and then Hacker Noon is number 3.
Yeah.
Right now.
And I wouldn't be surprised if The Mission moves off soon.
Yeah, interesting. All right.
All right.
Make sure I have all my windows up appropriately.
Let me make sure screen share works.
You want to warm up your voice at all, Nis, or do some?
La, 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 la. Is this coming through?
Yep, I can see it.
All right, cool.
All right. I'll just wait like another minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, for everybody on the Hangout, it's just going to be Nis today. We had emergency with 2 other people, so he's the only one talking today. But next time on April 12th, I think, is probably going to be like 5 people. So good luck, Nis.
Yeah.
Sorry, you get like the double whammy, basically.
Yeah, it's all right.
All right, cool. Yeah, so just again, everybody keep yourself muted until I call on you. And yeah, if you do need to post anything in the group chat, like a question, just put that it's from you. Or there's also the chat that I've sent out on YouTube, which will be displayed publicly. And so if you want to post questions there, if you do post a question, I'll end up calling on you for that. So great. All right, let's do this. Are you ready, Nis? You all good?
Let's do it.
All right, cool. It's Sunday, March 10th, 2019, and this is the Product Mentor Talk. Today, we are joined by one of our mentors, Nis, and we're going to be talking about how to drive user behavior change to unlock your product's full value. So let me please briefly explain the format. Product Mentor Program is a program where mentors and mentees are linked up and meet on a regular basis to get mentorship and learn from each other. Each of the product mentors is asked to give a talk during one of these sessions, and we're joined by people at the bottom of the screen that are active mentors or mentees. So please wave hi, everybody. Thank you. We are live people. And so now I'd like to do quick introductions by everybody. And if you do have any questions, there is a Q&A section at theproductmentor.com/live. And as the questions come in, I will jump in and ask them to our mentor during the talk. So for the introductions for everybody, please give me your name, role, your location, and which company you work for very briefly. So I'll go just from left to right on my screen. So Alberto, you're next.
Yes, my location, I'm in New York. I work for a new product that we're building that lets you invest in fine art. So you can buy shares of art just like you can in the stock market.
Great, thank you. And the next person is Dominic. Dominic, if you want to unmute and then give us a quick introduction.
Sorry, my keeps on cutting in and out. I'm hearing about every third word.
So yeah, just
yeah, I'm Dominic, product manager for a company called Stone Systems. Our product is called File Finder. It's where used by executive search professionals searching for executive. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Greg, you're next.
Hey everybody, my name is Greg Rokowski, product manager currently at a company called CB Insights. That's really it. If you have any questions about what I do, you can kind of hit me up on
Great. Yes.
Yes, co-founder of a company called Alpha. It's an on-demand insights platform. You'll hear all about me in a few minutes because I'm giving the talk on trade change.
Great. Thank you. And Ryan?
Oh, sorry. I lost an hour of sleep, need some coffee. My name is Ryan Pollock. I am in sunny Austin, Texas, where South by Southwest is just getting underway and ruining all the traffic near my office, but that's fine. I'm product manager at an email marketing, social media marketing company called Outbound Engine, and we do basically online marketing for small to medium businesses, automated.
Great. And Siddharth? Siddharth, do you want to give your introduction, please? Oh, dropped off. All right, well, and I'm Chris Butler. So I'm a chief product architect at IPsoft, which is a IT automation intelligent agent platform for enterprises. So great. What we're going to do now is I'm going to let Nis, if you want to just take it away and start.
Sure. Let's do this.
Thank you.
All right. Cool. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everyone. Hey, good morning. 1 hour earlier than you all expected. It's great to be talking to everyone again. I believe this is now my 7th talk, which is kind of crazy. I think there have only been 10 sessions, so 70% of them. Of all the talks, though, I think this is the topic I'm most passionate about, with the caveat that my thoughts are still very much fluid and evolving around this topic. So I really do welcome any and all questions and feedback during and after the talk. This is something I'm like continuously iterating on when it comes to driving behavior change. It's something I personally work on and really struggle with every day in a good way, both as a consumer and as someone building products in a company. One second here. And my company, Alpha, is, as I mentioned before, it's an on-demand insights platform that enables our clients to basically run experiments against their target users. And since our core customer base is in the Fortune 500, and experimentation is often not a default behavior within the Fortune 500, obviously we're involved a lot in driving behavior change around workflows and mindsets and budgeting even. And so it's one of the reasons we continuously develop a lot of content and resources you might be familiar with, including our podcast. This is Product Management, our Medium publication, Product Management Insider. So we do a lot around kind of what should product management, what should a data-driven company look like, and how should they operate. And so a lot of that has to do with behavior change, and that's kind of what I'll be talking about. So really, like, why do we fight behaviors? Like, what does it have to do with product management? Why do we build products for behaviors that don't yet exist instead of just focusing on products for behaviors that do exist, right? Like, why even get involved in trying to change the way people work in order to use a certain product? So I kind of have this theory, and without totally and dramatically overgeneralizing, I find that we're in like this kind of third phase of the digital age. So I'll just walk through like what I mean by that. If we think of the first phase of like the initial kind of web 1.0 or whatever you want to call it, it was really defined by the transition from analog to digital. We took things we sold in the physical world, like toys and books and sometimes pets, and then basically built web and online stores to do the exact same thing. So like we did bookkeeping in books and managed customer relationships via Rolodexes, and then we did it online. But the behaviors were like largely the same. It was just digital. The second phase kind of inadvertently disrupted the first. Second phase was basically the network effect of the first phase. So as everyone, moved their info online and merged it together, new capabilities emerged. We could basically professionally and casually network. Activities like dating and recruiting moved online and changed slowly, but over time dramatically because of the new capabilities. But it was still largely organic and just driven by predetermined preferences that could, so-called manifest given like the digital capability, right? This third phase that we're in is what I think is more than just automating existing behaviors. We're now basically taking a look at the online world, rethinking it from a business perspective and saying, hey, there are things you can fundamentally do differently in order to achieve like an even better form of success. Just a couple examples like HubSpot, which is a company I'll cite in a bit to give even more examples. But HubSpot told marketers to try this new thing called inbound marketing, which was a fundamentally new concept. Peloton has gotten people to buy stationary bikes with large tablets connected to the front of them so they could take the same fitness class from their living rooms. Glassdoor pressures companies to be more thoughtful about culture and transparency and to adopt fundamentally new practices to compete in the war for talent. So this third phase is really about unlocking new behaviors and processes that are only possible because of the digital age and wouldn't necessarily occur just through preference. And the challenge is that we as product people aren't really trained to do any of this. It's hard enough to build a product when the customer has a defined problem and a pretty good idea of what they want to solve it. But now we're building products and constructing customers for those products. And so that, I think, to me is really interesting. It's a challenge. So what are the factors to consider when driving behavior change? So first is to really kind of try to define this and try to provide a scope for it. So whenever I talk about behavior change, a lot of people bring up Nir Eyal's book, Hooked. It's really good, and all of his work afterward is really good as well. And I strongly encourage everyone to understand the concept he's formalized. What I'm talking about, though, is a little bit different. It's most of the behaviors I'm talking about are behaviors that would occur outside your product, not within the product. For example, just to go back to HubSpot, if a marketing team doesn't invest in creating content, they won't get a lot of value out of HubSpot. HubSpot really maximizes the value of the content you create. But if you're not doing content marketing, if you're not doing blogging and webinars, like there's no real, like HubSpot's not going to be super helpful. Again, like with Peloton, if a consumer doesn't eat right, they don't stretch, or if they would prefer to take a class alongside like other people in a studio, they're having a difficult time getting into Peloton. So Peloton has to drive behaviors really outside the experience of the tablet on the bike in order for you to even want to do it. And then in our case at Alpha, like I said before, if a product team doesn't care about making data-driven decisions, they probably won't want to experiment or generate on-demand insights. So we have to really look at and impact behaviors outside the scope of the product and the experience, outside of what I call like them logging in, to really have success with them. So that's the first point. The second is that we're kind of by definition fighting an uphill battle. Except for really forward-thinking innovators, change is almost always perceived as risky by virtually everyone. And behavior change often has to overcome like a mental barrier first. Just the fact that it's change of any sort makes it difficult. And then the fact that it's behavior change makes it even more difficult. Because not only is change perceived as risky, it also doesn't align with like the current status quo of success. So a marketing team that isn't already generating content is likely not to be measured or compensated. But requires you to do a lot of blogging, and you haven't done blogging before, odds are you don't define success in terms of the amount you blog or the success in your blogging. So they have to drive a behavior change that you don't get compensated for. A product team in a waterfall environment wouldn't be held accountable for incremental improvements, right? So developing products that require behavior change also means changing success metrics and potentially going as far as reconfiguring how your users or buyers are compensated, right? Like working with a senior member within that organization to change, incentives further down the chain, which is really interesting. The same can be true for consumers, although there's often an easier way to get them to rethink success. Whereas business users may literally know that something you're offering is better for their business, but they're not motivated to do it because they don't get directly compensated. Consumers can generally be a little bit more convinced to do something that's better for them, whether it's about things like weight loss or mindfulness or financial security. There's all sorts of examples there. So I haven't come across a widely accepted framework for driving behavior change. I did a lot of looking around. Obviously, there's a lot on behavior change, like if you want to personally undergo it. But in terms of a third party really driving it, especially in a product management or software environment, there's not a lot. This famous image is still kind of the best thing I've found on the topic, as it really captures the essence of what I'm talking about. Where behavior change is all about like creating a future state and taking a look at a present state and looking at the gap where your product is well aligned to create mutual value for both your business and for the customer. But I think this is still like too high level to be actionable. So I'm going to bring it down into the steps I've used. So I'm going to walk through a framework that really, again, as I said earlier, is a work in progress. I welcome any and all feedback on the call afterwards, generally all the time. It's something I'm still working on, but I'll kind of walk you through the way I look at it now. So in terms of framework, I always begin with the ending. I think flipping the script is a really effective form of storytelling, which is a whole nother topic in and of itself. I'm happy to dive into that more another time, but just like a quick point to make, I think some of the highest performing people in any function start with the ending. The highest performing salespeople I've ever met, sell outcomes rather than features. And the highest performing recruiters focus on career growth and job, like the opportunity rather than the role and compensation. And founders, like the best founders, when they pitch, they always begin with like the future, right, that they're building toward rather than like the business or product they're building. So if we start with the aspirational vision, it's this future state that may not make sense to a lot of people, but it's really important because it aligns with something that is well-defined and understood. I'm going to give examples of all this afterward, but I'll just walk through this first. But one example here is I really like the story of how Dropbox's founder, Drew Houston, explained his solution to investors for the first time. He walked into the pitch meeting, right? I don't know if this actually happened, but this is, so-called legend. He walked into the pitch meeting and said, "Oh crap, I can't do the pitch for the startup I'm building because I left my USB stick at home." And it's like, oh, actually not a problem because I can log into this cloud storage system and deliver my presentation from the browser, right? I could download it off the internet and deliver it, right? And so he started with this vision of cloud storage, right? And tied it to the value of like removing the experience of being embarrassed, right? So he started with that aspirational vision, but then immediately aligned it with like, hey, we've all had that time when we forgot our USB stick, and it's like the most miserable experience, and like it's hard to even remember now because it's been years since any of us carried USB sticks anywhere. But like he told that powerful vision and then aligned it with something that everyone could relate to. So the value alignment is really that business case or ROI that aligns perfectly with this future state, right? So then after really validating this future state and ensuring that it is exciting to your target audience, that's why it's important to start at the end as well. Is that if the aspirational vision does not get your audience excited, it's not really worth the whole journey to get there. So it's really important to start with the end and kind of figure out and iterate on that if that's something people are interested in. But after that, then I go back to the beginning, focus really on the present state. And that's where education comes in. Like, what is the present state? What are the problems with the present state? What could be going better, right? What are the characteristics that define the status quo? What's the gap that needs to be bridged? Education is a key component of this. Remember earlier I said that risk is a key barrier to behavior change. So a lot of education focuses on kind of two areas to overcome risk. The first I call like aspirational, which is, is there someone or something or a brand that you or your company admires that does things just way better? You don't really know how they do things, but they have more success. In a lot of cases, it just happens to be like Amazon or Netflix or Apple that companies aspire to. And if it's people, it's like someone you went to school with or a friend or, a celebrity that people admire, right? So there's like, that's one form of education could like make that real and bring that down to real life and say like, hey, you want your company to be more like Amazon. Well, here's what Amazon does, right? The second is a little bit more depressing, but also pretty effective, which is really desperation instead of aspiration. Desperation is realizing that what's risky isn't the behavior change, but is continuing to do what you've already been doing, right? And so a lot of education can focus on the risks of continuing along the status quo path. And so those are kind of two buckets. Obviously, there's a lot of other forms of education, but those are the two I've seen be really effective in terms of driving behavior change, right? And then comes commitment, which makes, the initial step real and tangible, but also gets the buyer invested in their own transformation. I think this is a huge component of where product management comes into it. I think many products and a lot of product onboarding is like chronological or starter versus premium sort of, and rather than focused on a behavior change spectrum. So rather than on making the risky or feared experience accessible and on putting the buyer on an accelerated path to the aspirational vision, it's chronological in terms of how the product works, rather than chronological in terms of the behaviors and the comfort level that the user has to ultimately have success. And then this tends to get then overcompensated for by customer success or support teams, right? Of course, there's a really important aspect of, support to create a safe space. And I think they're an invaluable resource during the onboarding phase and afterwards. But I think most companies can strike a much better balance and not over relying on them to do things that the product could do itself. Anyway, I want to come back to both of these in a little bit and just get through the rest of the framework now, and then I'll provide some more concrete examples. So after that are rewards, which are usually artificial elements that need to be introduced to let users know that they're making progress toward an ultimate goal or achievement, even if the steps along the way aren't in and of themselves like intrinsically valuable. So that like badges, swag, VIP status, stuff like that doesn't really translate into business results, but at least from a mindset perspective, lets the user know that they're going on a better path. This one area overlaps with a lot of the concept from Nir Eyal's book, Hooked. But where I've seen it done best is when the reward is for something you've done outside the product again, in your own life, to indicate that you are sustainably developing a new behavior. I've seen this be done really effectively by showcasing success stories, like case studies that help revamp a definition of success. It's like, look at what this person or this team is doing. You never would have thought this meant success before, but we're going to take this moment to explain how this is actually on a better path to success. So those are the sorts of kind of like rewards I've seen. And then ultimately, the most transformative concept here is leveling up, whether it's like physically, literally, spiritually, but there's some moment in time where the user is different and better than when they began the process. And this can happen multiple times. So you can think of this whole thing as a cycle, not just as a purely linear process, right? And it's kind of the central component of the entire framework around behavior change. So before we get into any examples and specific areas for product managers to focus on, I want to emphasize kind of 3 points here. So the first is that as you're listening, you probably already realize like most of this clearly is not your job directly. You probably have a lot of perspective and are in the room for the conversation around most things going on in this framework. But I'll clarify shortly what I think is and isn't your direct responsibility as a product person. Also, earlier I talked about the differences between B2B and B2C. At the end of the day, you know, we always kind of joke, and we know that every professional is also a consumer in their personal lives. So I think the same behaviors and psychologies are generally in effect. And so the framework still works. The difference is that in B2B, there's often an economic buyer who is different from the end user, who doesn't log in but might make the decision about renewing a contract. So I think you run into a lot of issues when you combine the buyer and the end user into one unit and think of them as following along the same behavior change framework, when perhaps there are actually two separate threads to consider. And I'll come back to that. And then, like I said before, a key element of this all is risk. But risk isn't always just a pure cost analysis of being wrong. Like, most users don't look at something and just do like a totally objective, you know, ROI analysis. I find that product teams often quantify risk too objectively, when it's better to think in terms of perceived risk from the user or from the buyer's perspective. Just as an example, if you're selling to someone who's like on the verge of retirement, they're probably not going to take a chance on anything, even if it has a 99% success rate. So risk is, you know, super contextualized to the individual and needs to be defined, I think, on an almost ad hoc basis. So having said that, I'll go into an example. This is one that I'm uniquely familiar with. It's called Lose It. It's a calorie counting and weight loss app that their claim is really they optimize for your body's metabolism and unique DNA. So calorie counting, I think, as a concept, and from a lot of people I've heard, it's just a pretty weird concept. It abstracts away the food you eat into basically just numbers. It's controversial for a number of reasons. And overall, as a percentage of the population, very few people do it or see any need in doing it religiously beyond just like rough mental estimates. Most people who count calories still just do it in their head or on a sheet of paper manually. And a lot of people don't know about their body's particular chemical makeup to understand how different foods might even affect them differently. So there's a lot of like the aspirational vision that Lose It has like doesn't make a ton of sense to a lot of people. I don't think they do every aspect of the behavior change framework that I laid out like close to perfectly, but I think they do some really interesting things really well. So their aspirational vision, again, is really to take one of their partner's DNA tests and then count calories efficiently in order to eat an optimal diet. Again, I don't think that makes any sense, but they translate that into just like sustainable weight loss is the value, right? That's the value alignment. So Lose It essentially understands that weight loss in and of itself isn't such an accomplishment because many people have done it. It's keeping the weight off, which is the accomplishment. And so the app really emphasizes the optimization aspect that's correlated, right? So here's the aspirational vision. It doesn't matter, or it doesn't make sense, I should say. Here's the value, is sustainably losing weight, which is only possible given our aspirational vision. And then it all kind of clicks, right? You're like, oh, there's something to this DNA thing that is the key to it all, right? So to that end, Lose It is actually kind of a misnomer, but that's fine. The app, I imagine maybe it started as one thing and then eventually became something else. The app really services a ton of content around health and fitness based on your DNA. The premise basically requires you to even use this app more or less get a DNA test from one of their partners where the results are then integrated into the app. Like based on your DNA results, it recommends different foods and different dieting to you. These tests cost like $50 to $200. And that's really the commitment aspect that I was outlining before, which I also call kind of sunk cost as a service, where the user gets to commit to doing something in the future that they mentally want to do now. So it's kind of like if you paid for it, you might as well try it for some period of time. Another example, like I think Peloton does that very well. Like the bike costs $2,500, but then the subscription is just $50 a month. Like their retention rate is crazy, even though as a percentage of people who buy the bike who ride it might be quite low, because who wants a $2,500 paperweight sitting in their living room, like looking at them and laughing at them? So I call this like sunk cost as a service, where you know you want to do something in the future, so you'll pay a lot of money now so that you'll have this fallacy just hanging around where you'll never turn it off because you'll be like, well, I already paid for it. And that can be helpful when it's something that's potentially actually good for you. So yeah, continuing along the framework, Lose It manages the safe space concept better than almost any app I've seen. They really deeply understand the challenges with sustainable weight loss and routinely emphasize how it can be a series of battles. They always, like every time you have a day that goes up, they like the app will explain like, hey, this is not a linear process. Cheat days happen. The results aren't immediate. Like it readjusts when you'll achieve your goal and stuff like that. They're also really active in supporting online communities on Reddit and Facebook where people talk about experiments and new foods. So that they just do a really good job of the safe space and really like partnering with you alongside this journey. And then from a rewards perspective, the app totally understands jobs to be done and has all sorts of integrations that encourage a healthy lifestyle overall, not just pure weight loss. So it directly integrates with wearables and fitness apps and can translate the workouts into bonus calories for the day. In case you're wondering, in that GIF, it's me in a studio class at Peloton. But wearing the Apple Watch, it does track everything in Lose It as well. So they just do a good job of integrations, I think. And it also emphasizes calorie counting streaks and progress toward goal. You've been counting calories 20 days in a row, right? There's no necessarily intrinsic value in doing that because you could have had like 14,000 calories each day and it would still give you a reward. But Lose It just recognizes the fact that you're counting calories is in and of itself a behavior change, and that they then can drive and align with success ultimately. And then, yeah, for anyone here who's known me for a couple of years, you'll know that I personally benefited pretty significantly from this app. So I can speak to it personally to a pretty deep level. So weight loss quite nicely to the concept of leveling up, but Lose It still does a really good job of showcasing before and after photos in their community within the app. A lot of their content, a lot of their education, like really encourages you to take a photo when you start. And then it does, you know, within the app, it does all these funny things like translating the weight loss you've had into the equivalent animal. Like, you know, when you lose like some amount of pounds, I forget how much, like 12 pounds, it's like, hey, you lost the equivalent of a rabbit, which is kind of funny. And people like post that stuff online and they show the before and after. So overall, I think they do not a perfect job, like I said before, across the whole framework, but I think they do a pretty good job. That's a B2C example. I want to move on to HubSpot, which is a company I've liked for a long time. As a B2B example, I think probably most of you are familiar with them, but you know, just in case you're not, it's a marketing automation platform that only succeeds when organizations re-engineer their sales funnels. So what does that mean? So HubSpot launched the inbound marketing revolution, which basically flipped the sales funnel. They advocated for companies to recognize that the biggest opportunity was to build channels to their own brand rather than cold calling every potential customer in the phone book. This all seems obvious now, but like 10 years ago, marketing teams really just focused on ads, trade shows, and collateral. And today, significant investments go into blogging, videos, and thought leadership channels, which really bring customers to them. HubSpot evangelized, again, like I said before, what they called this inbound methodology that made sense to very few people. It was all about attracting potential customers to your brand rather than via outbound research or outbound outreach, I should say. And of course, all their messaging tied to leads, which is a well-defined and understood unit of value in the business world. But like if you were to go to executives 10 or 15 years ago and be like, your company needs to be doing inbound and blogging and videos and webinars, people will be like, that makes no sense. But you tell them, hey, that'll get you leads. And they're like, okay, well, that makes sense. As you'd expect, no one then, of course, does the education and content marketing aspect better than HubSpot, since they basically pioneered education as the underlying strategy to inbound marketing. So they have infinite resources to de-risk inbound marketing, explain best practices, and develop a community around marketers and people who do inbound marketing. From a commitment perspective, I think the mechanism that is often easiest and quite effective within the enterprise software world is to have an implementation or onboarding fee. Even if there's no cost to your business or product directly to like set up a new customer, I think onboarding fees really get users to deliberately take their activities more seriously. I've seen a lot of times when like it's free to get started, people just kind of haphazardly walk into it. But when they have to make like even a small initial investment, they're like, okay, I'm going to make sure I know how to use this platform and I do the things that, you know, the customer success team tells me to do. To that end, I think unaided free trials can actually be pretty dangerous if your product involves behavior change, because you're more or less setting the user up for failure. You're giving them access to something that they don't have the behaviors to get the most out of, right? As always allowed, I'm sure they have the data to back it up, but it never quite made sense to me. That being said, they do have an incredible user experience, and they do call you immediately after you set up a trial. So they're trying to mitigate the chance that you check it out and say, well, we don't do any blogging, so how would this be helpful, and then leave for good. So I imagine they have better data than me just saying it doesn't make sense to me. In terms of a safe space, an extension of HubSpot's education content marketing is their massive community of marketers, partners, evangelists. You can get virtually any question answered about how to use HubSpot, but also like how to do inbound marketing within 30 minutes. From a rewards perspective, HubSpot has a number of add-on tools and events around benchmarking, so you can increase your performance. I think underscoring all of this is the general sentiment that if you are performing well at inbound marketing, but your company doesn't really quite understand or value it, you'll have another job opportunity lined up from HubSpot's community and network, and the ability to get put on their resume that they've gotten certified via HubSpot. So I think they've done this kind of rewards concept really well. And then from a leveling up perspective, I think HubSpot does a really great job, especially when it comes to understanding the difference between the buyer and the end user. As I said before, in B2B, I often joke that we all essentially sell the same thing, right? The job to be done, so to speak, is to help your user or your buyer get a job promotion. So we're all selling that as an outcome, right? And HubSpot recognizes that and offers two sets of reporting, like the helpful stuff that actually measures your performance as a marketer day to day. And that's what most products are good at. What most products aren't good at is the second thing that HubSpot does, which is basically they give you just templated reports that are the things your boss wants to see and report on around revenue results. And you just click like one button and push it to your boss. So this is driven by countless integrations and workflow tools that enable all like any of the inbound marketing activities you're doing to translate into already well-defined success metrics. So I think they do a really good job of like understanding the user is undergoing some behavior change and cares about some set of metrics, but like at the end of the day, their boss still just cares about the basics and the more traditional stuff. So they make it really easy to track both. That's HubSpot. So as I promised before, I would kind of talk about the areas I think are your job as a product person, right? So to wrap this up, any of you work on a product that requires some extent of behavior change to happen outside your product probably have varying aspects of responsibility within this framework. In my opinion, though, there are three core areas you definitely have to own. The first is measuring, right? Because as a product person, as a team, organizations, everyone, they optimize whatever it is they measure. So you need to be measuring the right things. If you measure the wrong things, you're going to optimize for the wrong, something for the wrong outcomes, right? So you have to measure the right things. Overall, engagement and NPS dashboards, which are kind of the default, can be helpful. But I'm finding the more and more I talk to product teams, of those correlate to retention or success, like NPS. I know every team measures it, and then I ask them, like, does it correlate to retention or success? And often it doesn't. And at Alpha, I know that from driving behavior change, helpful metrics are not NPS or engagement. Like, again, even we track them, but like they don't correlate to retention or success. Rather, to other sets of metrics that are often binary and fall into two buckets. So the first is literally a behavior change, like has the key use case or achievement been adopted or unlocked? This is like tracking of a positive pattern that correlates to behavior change outside your product. So in the Lose It's example, like has the user taken a DNA test, right, and integrated it with Lose It? That's a binary yes, no. Like that's a behavior that someone never took before, never understood or cared about their DNA or their chemical makeup or how it would impact their dieting. And it's just binary, like have they done it or have they not, right? In HubSpot's case, like have they joined an online community? Has this inbound marketer joined an online community to network with other people about this new concept they knew nothing about, right? You could just ask them over a customer success call. You could have it in the platform, just like hey, we'd like to learn more about you. Can you click yes, no? Or you might have a direct integration, no. But I've often seen that those sorts of activities, those kind of binary metrics, do a much better job at correlating with success. And the second bucket is kind of an anti-pattern. The second bucket of metrics is an anti-pattern. Like, has some element of risk been exposed? So in Lose It's case, like has the user regained all the weight, or have they in HubSpot's case, like have they forwarded the wrong report to their boss? Right? Those are also kind of binary, but those are anti-patterns. That's like the user did the wrong behavior. right? So I think measuring the right things that align with behavior change is critical, especially, like I said, if your product's full value requires the user to undergo behavior change outside the scope of your product, you have to measure the right things around that. Second, you have to understand who the ultimate decision makers are and how to impact them. I think it's really dangerous to ever think you're only impacting the person logging into your product. Even in the B2C world, where someone might be losing weight for a significant other or to acquire a significant other, right? So the most obvious is in B2B, where there's economic buyers who determine retention churn. But product managers I see always, or not always, but almost always prefer to talk to more relatable end users rather than the actual buyers. And that's, I think, where NPS can be really dangerous, because NPS is often asked to the end user who's not paying the bill. So it's easy to measure satisfaction amongst people not paying for it, right? If your product is just way too expensive for what's out there in the market, the end user might like it because they understand it and, you know, they're using it, but like the buyer may not. So I think it's really critical to understand kind of the behaviors of both the end user and the buyer in terms of behavior change. And the last area is to broadly really just work on a cohesive behavior change strategy. So to agree on what activities and behaviors your customers need to embrace outside of your product to ultimately have success with your product. And then you can work with your sales team to set the right expectations around that, with your marketing team to focus on education around the right aspects of risk and aspiration, to work with client success to help kind of create that safe space as I outlined. And then product and engineering can really focus on the rewards and leveling up aspects. Even though I can't really recommend any like holistic framework online, I think there's more resources on driving behavior change than ever before in both B2B and B2C environments. Behavior change, I think, is becoming a really increasingly popular topic, and even more relevant as organizations and individuals really try to adapt to a rapidly changing world. And in this kind of Web 3.0, as I alluded to earlier, I think there's just a lot more and more products that require users to live a different way to get the most value out of them. So here are some of the resources. I think Nirayal and James Clear have done a lot on behavior change. And I found a few more. CEB is kind of like a business and research group, and they do a lot of studies and a lot of really interesting stuff. They, you know, that organization is responsible for the books, The Challenger Sale and Challenger Customer, which are all about driving behavior change within your customers. There's a lot of organizational behavior theories from McKinsey, HBR, and First Round Capital. And then really just like listen to success stories from products you've seen out there that, you know, kind of the rule of thumb, if they're driving behavior changes, if it's a successful company now doing something that involves an activity you never did before that product came out, like then they did a pretty good job at driving behavior change. And I would, you know, look at their stories and listen to them and see what they've done. Other than that, thanks everyone for listening, especially those of you who perhaps don't currently work on products that require behavior change, but who are interested in one day potentially doing so. For those who are currently doing so, to get started, I think it's helpful to really consider behavior change and like to what extent and where, and then to then work toward better understanding what those behaviors might be and how you can impact them as a product manager. Other than that, thanks, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you, Nis. I do have one question actually for you. You talk a little bit about stakeholders or the real buyer of something. And so I'd love to hear more about are there different rules with how you do behavioral change with them, or how do you learn about behavioral change for them? Because that's a very interesting topic.
Yeah, so we have basically, so I'll talk about Alpha, and then I can talk about what I've seen elsewhere. Like we have two different things. We have a maturity spectrum for like an entire team. So in our case, it's around data-driven decision making, right? Like we're on a maturity spectrum. Does the team we're talking to, and the team would involve both the buyer and the user, right? Where are they in terms of data-driven decision making? Like they currently make no data-driven decisions. That's like a ton of companies and a ton of teams, right? They make ad hoc. That's probably the bulk make, you know, point in time, like this is a real decision we need some data around, we're going to go commission a study, right? And then there's some that do it ongoing. They realize like, hey, this whole world is changing and we need data every day, and like we should be doing this all the time, right? And then there are ones that do it collaboratively and so on, right? So there's like there's 5 buckets, right? But then that's like from a data-driven, that's the objective ROI standpoint. Then we have, for every level within the organization, we have like a behavior change spectrum, right? Which is like, here's the things the CEO cares about. And what the CEO cares about is often changing the culture of the company, changing the way the company works, like kind of is very, very qualitative, right? And so the behavior change around that is like, literally, are they saying something in a shareholder letter, right? Stuff like that, right? Then there's, you know, the CXOs, the SVPs, the directors, the end users, right? And so we literally lay out what we think as a general rule each group wants. Again, you know, I do encourage that not to overgeneralize everyone, but you know, if you want to scale a sales team and scale a product team, you kind of have to have rules of thumb, right? And so that's the way we've done it. We have a maturity spectrum, and then for each individual type of user, there's some general things we think they want. And so the rewards and the leveling up plays into that.
That's great. No, thank you very much. Great. And if there's no further questions, just like to thank Nis for doing this great talk on how to drive user behavior change to unlock your product's full potential. And as always, the presentation will be posted on our SlideShare channel, YouTube, and a few other places. And so a big thank you from me, Chris Butler, for joining us. And thank you to everybody that joined today from the Product Mentor. Unfortunately, we only have one talk today due to some emergencies. But don't forget, please, if you're interested in being a product mentor, please contact Jeremy or I through the community. Thank you very much. Yes. All right. Thank you. Yeah, there's a really interesting post that I saw from, I think it's Breaking Smart, about like stakeholders and kind of the idea of executive sponsorship and the different ways it kind of works out. And I'll send it over to you. I'm still
yeah.
Once, and I didn't understand most of it, so I feel like I need to read it again, basically. But anyways.
Yeah, definitely send it. I'm always looking for stuff around this. I think one of the concepts I didn't go too deep on that is the hardest for people to understand is the anti-patterns. Is like half the reasons for churn are because something happened, not because something didn't happen. And like, how do you track the occurrence of things that shouldn't happen, right? And everyone wants to track NPS. I was like, yeah, but you're asking NPS from someone who thinks the product's free. Like, they don't know how much it costs.
Exactly. Yeah, there's before you know, I moved on from philosophy, I was working for a very large financial institution that is focused on online trading, and their big issue is around like attrition, and almost, I would say 50% of the time it's because the product just has a bug that they just really just, and the other half is that
that's a common example.
Yeah, it totally is. So that's cool. Interesting. Well, cool. Thanks. Let's get coffee sometime soon in the next couple of weeks, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Take care.